All right, Friday, a New York judge froze the sitting president's personal assets, President Trump, $573 million. Court documents filed that morning. And former Attorney General Pam Bondi's congressional testimony is what triggered it. I've gone through the 142-page ruling, the hearing transcripts, Bondi's sworn statements to the House Oversight Committee. Constitutional crisis, that's not hyperbole. A sitting president, his former attorney general's testimony used against him. State court asserting authority over presidential assets. Bondi resigned 2 weeks ago. Now we know why. Yesterday, the White House responded, made it more complicated. Here's what the documents actually say. Quick context. Donald Trump, President of the United States, second term, inaugurated January 2025. Pam Bondi, close Trump ally for years, Florida Attorney General before joining his cabinet. The issue? Pre-presidential financial entanglements. Civil fraud case from New York existed before he took office. Timeline.fast version. 2024. Trump wins election. New York civil fraud verdict already issued. $380 million judgment under appeal. January 2025. Takes office. Case continues. Claims presidential immunity from civil enforcement. April 2026. Bondi becomes Attorney General. Senate confirmation 51-49. Controversial from the start. May 2026. House Oversight Committee investigating potential conflicts of interest. Bondi subpoenaed for testimony about her prior legal work for Trump entities before becoming AG. She fights the subpoena, claims executive privilege, loses in court. June 7. Bondi resigns as Attorney General, cites personal reasons, doesn't mention the subpoena. June 1-2. 6 days after resigning, Bondi testifies to Congress, 5 hours under oath, no longer protected by executive privilege. June 19th, Friday, New York judge issues emergency asset freeze based on information from her testimony. That's the setup. Now it gets messy. Okay, the evidence. First document. New York Supreme Court ruling filed Friday, page 23. Judge Sarah Chen writes, quoting here, testimony from former U.S. Attorney General confirms defendant's personal direction of 17 asset transfers while subject to judgment enforcement. That's not commentary. That's the ruling. What it means? Bondi testified Trump personally ordered asset movements during a period when New York courts said he couldn't. Page 47, different section. Bondi's congressional testimony transcript. She's asked about her work as Trump's personal attorney in 2024. Question, did Mr. Trump discuss asset protection strategies with you? Bondi, yes, that was part of the legal representation I provided before my government service. Question, did these discussions continue after the New York verdict? Bondi, yes, until I was nominated as Attorney General in March 2026. That window verdict to her nomination that quote is when New York says illegal transfers happened. But here's the critical part. Question, why did you resign as Attorney General? Bondi, I became aware that my prior legal work might conflict with my duties as AG. Question, did the president ask you to intervene in the New York case? Long pause in the transcript. Then, I was asked for my opinion on DOJ's position regarding presidential immunity. Question, what was your opinion? Bondi, I told the president I couldn't ethically provide that opinion given my prior involvement. Question, what happened next? Bondi, I tendered my resignation. Read that again. Trump asked his AG to help him fight a case she'd helped him create the problem in. She refused. She resigned. I went through the timeline 3 times. Patterns clear. Between September 2024 and March 2025, while Bondi was his personal attorney, $340 million moved through 6 LLCs in Delaware and Wyoming. 12 properties transferred to Trump family trusts. At least $127 million shifted to entities created post-verdict. all detailed in the court's Exhibit F through Exhibit M. Now, what nobody's covering, page 89, email exhibits. 37 emails between Trump associates. Bondi CC'd on 14 of them. Subject lines include asset restructure.timeline and Nevada LLC final approval. One email dated November 4th, 2024, 2 days after he won the election, PB confirms structure legally sound. Proceed before inauguration. PB, Pam Bondi. The structures they're referencing? Judge Chen calls them vehicles designed to frustrate judgment collection. Here's the other thing. Bondi testified she gave legal advice only, wasn't involved in execution. But prosecutors submitted her billing records, attached as Exhibit R. Shows 73 billable hours between October 2024 and January 2025. Descriptions include call, entity formation, review transfer documents, discuss timeline with DJT. That's more than advice, that's implementation involvement. Then there's this, page 103. Bondi's testimony about her time as Attorney General. April to June 2026. She describes growing pressure, Trump asking about New York case constantly. Quote from transcript, "The president wanted DOJ to file a brief supporting presidential immunity. I told him it would be inappropriate given my prior representation." Another quote, "I consulted with the Office of Legal Counsel. They agreed I had a conflict. Then, when I couldn't do what the president needed, I knew I had to step down." Put it together, Sitting president's hand-picked AG helped him hide assets as his lawyer, then resigned rather than help him as AG. Judge Chen's conclusion, page 134. Defendant's status as president does not immunize personal assets from civil judgment enforcement. Former Attorney General Bondi's testimony establishes both knowledge and personal direction of the challenged transfers. Constitutional scholars calling this unprecedented. Fallout freeze covers 11 identified properties. Restraining order on $573 million in traced assets. Order effective immediately. White House in chaos. No permanent Attorney General. Acting AG now leading DOJ. All documented. That's just the ruling. That's the scribe. There quotes a DOJ memo that dropped yesterday. And what Bondi revealed about internal White House pressure is explosive. More coming. Okay, but look, gotta be fair here. The presidential powers side has serious arguments. And honestly, constitutional law supports some of it. Their position, state court can't freeze a sitting president's assets, interferes with executive function, creates separation of powers crisis. And that's not nothing. Trump's personal attorney, Mike Davis, put it this way. No state judge has authority to impair the president's financial capacity while in office. Don't agree with all of it. But the constitutional question is real. What they're arguing, first. Bondi, quote, his testimony was about attorney-client privilege matters. She shouldn't have been forced to answer. Congressional overreach. Second. Even if transfers happened, they were pre-presidential. Can't enforce judgment against a sitting president. Third. This is New York targeting a Republican president. Political prosecution disguised as civil enforcement. Fourth. Bondi, quote, it's a disgruntled former employee. She resigned. Now she's helping Congress attack the president. Revenge testimony. Former White House counsel under Bush, Brad Berenson, said, state interference with presidential assets raises serious constitutional concerns about federal supremacy. Their evidence? DOJ Office of Legal Counsel memo from 1973 says sitting presidents can't be criminally prosecuted. Supreme Court precedent on presidential immunity still evolving. No prior case of state court freezing presidential assets. Even some liberal constitutional scholars admit this is legally complicated. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe, no Trump fan. The question of whether civil asset enforcement interferes with Article 2 powers is genuinely unresolved. Look, I quote, I'm not here to tell you who's right. New York's interpretation? Bondi confirmed knowledge of asset concealment. That's fraud. Presidential immunity doesn't cover personal fraud committed before taking office. Presidential powers interpretation? Once you're president, state courts can't touch you, period. Interferes with ability to govern. Both can't be true. That's what makes this a constitutional crisis. Defense argues Judge Chen exceeded her authority. Federal courts should decide presidential immunity questions, not state courts. They're filing emergency appeals to federal court, arguing removal to federal jurisdiction, also pointing out Bondi's credibility is questionable. She accepted the AG position, took the oath, then quit after 2 months. Their read, she's bitter about how it ended, using congressional testimony to settle scores. And look, that quote is possible. White House sources leaked that Bondi wanted more independence than Trump would give, clashed repeatedly in her short tenure. Maybe her testimony is payback. But here's the thing. She brought receipts, emails, billing records, dates, amounts. It's not just her word, it's documented. What I can tell you, what the legal documents show, and they show both sides have constitutional arguments worth taking seriously. This didn't come out of nowhere. Backstory.quick. Years back, .New York opened civil investigation into Trump Organization, property valuations, loan applications. 2023. Trial happens. Trump testifies. Judge finds repeated fraud. February 2024. Verdict. $380 million penalty. Trump appeals. At this point, Bondi's his personal attorney, has been for months. November 2024. Trump wins presidency. New legal question. Can New York enforce judgment against president-elect? His lawyers argue no, constitutional concerns. New York says presidency doesn't erase personal liability. Standoff develops. Bondi's still advising him, still his lawyer. January 2025. Trump inaugurated. Immediately claims sitting presidents are immune from civil enforcement actions. New York files motion to continue enforcement. Legal battle escalates. March 2026. Trump nominates Bondi as Attorney General. Previous AG retired. Senate hearings get heated. Democrats ask about her work for Trump personally. Bondi discloses she represented him, says she'll recuse from any DOJ matters involving the president personally. Barely confirmed, 51-49. April 2026. Bondi sworn in as Attorney General. Within weeks, problems surface. Trump expects her to use DOJ resources to fight New York. She realizes she can't ethically do it. May 2026. House Oversight Committee investigating conflicts of interest. Bondi subpoenaed to testify about pre-AG work. She claims executive privilege, but she's in an impossible position. Her prior work created the problem. Her current job prevents her from fixing it for him. Early June. Internal DOJ memos leak. Bondi consulted ethics officials. They told her she had conflicts on multiple matters. June 7. She resigns. Sudden, unexpected. White House claims it was mutual. Sources say Trump was furious. June 1-2. Now a private citizen, Bondi testifies to Congress. No executive privilege, no attorney-client privilege on factual matters, just oath and subpoena. She answers everything. June 1-9. This happens. See where this is going? Like this, if the constitutional breakdown makes sense, this gets more complicated. Friday, 11:47 a.m. Here's what happened. Judge Sarah Chen issued the ruling. Presidential immunity does not extend to personal asset concealment. Former Attorney General Bondi's detailed testimony establishes a pattern of intentional judgment avoidance. Legal world went silent. What followed? Immediate freeze on 11 properties across 4 states. Restraining order covering $573 million in identified assets. Trump's personal attorneys given 48 hours to respond. Within hours. Now, what everyone missed. While media focused on the freeze, something else happened. Department of Justice released an internal memo, Office of Legal Counsel, written while Bondi was still AG, dated May 30th, week before she resigned, titled State Court Authority Over Presidential Personal Assets. 43 pages. Conclusion: state courts may exercise jurisdiction over personal civil matters not directly affecting executive functions. That's DOJ.Trump, quote, own DOJ, saying New York might have authority here. And Bondi ordered that memo. It's in the filing notes. She asked OLC to analyze whether she could ethically defend the president on this. They told her no. State courts have jurisdiction, presidential immunity doesn't apply. That's why she resigned. Then the White House counsel's office released a different statement Friday. President disagrees with prior OLC interpretation. Will seek federal court review. Prior OLC interpretation. That's the memo Bondi requested. President Trump versus his own Justice Department's legal analysis. Analysis his AG ordered before quitting. Constitutional crisis confirmed. Here's what makes this devastating. Bondi wasn't an enemy. She was loyal, defended him for years. But when she got to DOJ and saw the actual legal analysis, couldn't do it. Resigned rather than help him. Then testified truthfully when subpoenaed. Friday afternoon, Trump posted on Truth Social, Pam Bondi quit on me, then stabbed me in the back. Disloyal, told Congress lies. Sad. 3 hours later, emergency motion filed in federal court seeking removal to federal jurisdiction, arguing state court lacks authority over sitting president. Calculated move, gets this out of New York state courts, but here's the problem. Federal courts will see the same evidence, including Bondi's testimony, including the OLC memo she commissioned. This is where it explodes. Stay with me. What Bondi revealed about White House pressure changes everything. This part matters. What are constitutional experts saying? Former Solicitor General Neil Katyal argued 50 Supreme Court cases. A sitting president facing state asset freeze, we quote, in uncharted constitutional territory. Plain English, no precedent, no clear answer. Another angle, conservative legal scholar Jonathan Turley. Judge Chen's ruling invites Supreme Court review of presidential immunity scope. Key there, this is headed to the Supreme Court. Everyone knows it. Here's what's interesting. Even former Trump White House counsel Don McGahn said Bondi's testimony created an evidentiary record that's hard to overcome. When your own former counsel says it's problematic, pay attention. Presidential powers expert Jack Goldsmith, Harvard Law. If state courts can freeze presidential assets, can they garnish presidential salary? Seize Camp David? Line drawing becomes critical. That's the slippery slope argument, and it's serious. But other side has scholars too. Former acting Solicitor General Walter Dellinger. Personal financial misconduct isn't an executive function. Constitution doesn't shield it. Constitutional law professor Erwin Chemerinsky. Presidential immunity protects official acts. Concealing assets from fraud judgments isn't an official act. Then there's the Bondi factor. Legal ethics expert Stephen Gillers, NYU Law. An attorney general resigning rather than defending the president speaks volumes about the legal merits. Another expert, former DOJ official Harry Litman. Bondi commissioned the OLC memo, read it, and quit. That memo will be Exhibit A in any federal proceeding. Consensus among experts. Novel constitutional question without clear precedent. Federal courts will decide, not state courts. Supreme Court review likely by 2027. Bondi's resignation and testimony weakens Trump's position significantly. Outcome affects presidential power permanently. That's where legal scholars land. Not agreement, deep division. But everyone agrees this is historic. The ruling, regardless of outcome, reshapes presidential accountability. If this breakdown's cutting through the noise, hit like. Helps me know what depth you want on constitutional stories. Why should you care? Real talk. How this affects actual people. Presidential power. If you care about executive branch functioning, this matters. Can state courts freeze a president's personal wealth? Makes them financially vulnerable, potentially subject to state-level pressure. Your concern? Precedent applies to future presidents, Democrat or Republican. Imagine a Republican-controlled Texas freezing a Democratic president's assets over different litigation. Not theoretical anymore. Line just crossed. Separation of powers. If you took civics class, remember checks and balances? This tests whether state courts can check federal executive power. One reading, good. Accountability. No one above the law. Other reading, bad. State judges controlling federal president. Founders didn't intend that. Both perspectives valid. Your stake. How much power should state courts have over federal officials? Answer determines who controls whom. Cabinet instability. Pam Bondi is the second cabinet member to resign this term. Attorney General position is critical. National security, law enforcement, civil rights. Right now, there's an acting AG, not Senate confirmed. If you care about stable government, this matters. Revolving door at DOJ affects everything from immigration enforcement to antitrust cases. What informed people watching? Who takes the job next? Anyone with Trump legal entanglement has conflicts. Anyone without loyalty to Trump won't last. Catch-22 for finding qualified nominee. Political, different angle. Trump's second term. 2028 election coming. Vice President J.D. Vance is likely successor candidate. This damages Trump brand, affects Vance's position. Democrats pointing to this as vindication, no one above the law. Republicans calling it proof of deep state targeting. But harder to claim when Trump's own AG quit over it. Midterms in 2026. This November, 5 months away. Voters care. Motivates both bases. Your vote influenced by whether you think this is justice or persecution. Practical. What happens if freeze holds? President can't access $573 million personally. Affects his business empire. Properties potentially liquidated to satisfy judgment. Real economic impact. Trump properties employ thousands. Asset sales mean restructuring. Some jobs affected. If you work in hospitality, real estate, or related industries in cities with Trump properties, this isn't abstract. Trump hotels in Miami, Las Vegas, Chicago, all potentially affected. Not fear-mongering, real implications unfolding. How's the White House responding? Escalating fast. Saturday morning, Trump held emergency meeting with White House counsel, personal attorneys, congressional leaders. Then, official statement. President Trump will fight this unconstitutional overreach. Pam Bondi's testimony is false and vindictive. State courts have no authority over the commander-in-chief. Sunday. Bondi responded through her attorney. Statement read, I testified truthfully under oath. I have no further comment. Brief, professional, doesn't engage. Monday, yesterday, House Republicans announced investigation into weaponization of congressional oversight, targeting Democrats who subpoenaed Bondi. Senate Democrats responded. Former Attorney General gave sworn testimony. If it revealed wrongdoing, that's on the wrongdoer, not the witness. Then last night, leaked to media, Trump reportedly considering executive order declaring presidential immunity from all state court actions. Constitutional scholars say that order would be immediately challenged, would set up direct Supreme Court confrontation. Also leaked, Trump, quote, searching for new attorney general. Shortlist includes loyalists with no Trump legal entanglements, Problem is, Senate might not confirm another controversial nominee. Democrats already calling for independent AG, not cooling down, accelerating. White House versus New York, president versus his former AG, Congress investigating itself, and DOJ leaderless in the middle of it. What's still unclear: 1. Will federal court remove this case from state jurisdiction? Emergency motion pending, could be decided by Friday. 2. Will Bondi face retaliation? Trump's threatening defamation lawsuit against her, legal experts say it's baseless. Congressional testimony has absolute immunity, but Trump might try anyway. 3. Who becomes the next AG, and will they touch this case? Coming up, Thursday, June 25, federal district court hearing on removal motion, Judge Marcus Williams presiding. Friday, June 26, if federal court doesn't act, Trump's response to asset freeze due in state court. Monday, June 29, that House Oversight Committee scheduled vote on holding Trump in contempt for refusing related document subpoenas. June 30, New York wants full asset disclosure. Trump's team refusing. Date to watch, Thursday's federal hearing. If case moves to federal court, freeze might be paused. If it stays in state court, freeze likely holds pending appeal. 48 hours determines trajectory. Subscribe. I'll break down Thursday's federal hearing and whatever Supreme Court filing comes next. This is moving to the highest court. Where we are right now: $573 million in presidential assets frozen by state court order. Federal removal motion pending. Former Attorney General's testimony is key evidence. She's lawyered up. Acting Attorney General running DOJ. No permanent replacement announced. Constitutional crisis declared by scholars across spectrum. Scheduled events: Thursday, June 25th, federal removal hearing. Friday, June 26th, asset freeze response deadline. Monday, June 29th, congressional contempt vote. June 30th, asset disclosure deadline disputed. Supreme Court watchers noting this case has all markers for emergency review, could reach highest court by August. President Trump simultaneously running the country and fighting asset freeze. Pam Bondi simultaneously defending her testimony and potentially facing presidential retaliation. New York prosecutors pushing forward despite political firestorm. Every decision from here has constitutional implications. This isn't just about Trump or Bondi anymore. It's about presidential power, state authority, separation of powers, whether cabinet members can testify truthfully without retribution, whether state courts can enforce judgments against sitting presidents. Whatever courts decide becomes precedent for the next 200 years. That's where we are. President Trump, assets frozen by state judge. Federal courts deciding if that's constitutional. Former Attorney General Bondi, testimony triggered crisis, resigned rather than defend what she helped create. Surface read, political chaos, legal disaster, constitutional emergency. But watch two things. First, Thursday, quote, federal court ruling. If Judge Williams removes this to federal jurisdiction, entire dynamic changes. Second, whether any Supreme Court justices signal emergency review willingness. If 4 justices want to hear this immediately, freeze probably gets stayed. If they let it play out in lower courts first, freeze holds for months. I'll be watching the federal court's language Thursday, whether the judge criticizes state overreach or validates state authority, whether Bondi's OLC memo gets mentioned. That could be devastating for Trump's position. Story's not over, still unfolding in real time. Subscribe for the analysis when Thursday's ruling drops. I'll break down what it means for presidential power and what happens to Bondi next. Talk soon.